So just welcome everybody to an exploration of embodying the skeleton, part of the series of embodied touch body work that I'm doing. Just to let you know that next week's going to be the last one pre-Christmas. I did mention that in my email, just because lots of things are happening, and just to give people a bit of space too. I will continue doing the bone yoga classes. So if if you feel like coming into and joining one of those classes, you're very welcome. Because we do explore a lot of the things that we go through in these classes we do in the yoga. And it's kind of not classic yoga, but it's more related to the skeleton, how the skeleton works. And we work with the breath, and just looking at lots of sort of multifaceted inquiries, really. And if you are familiar with the work that I do, there's a few things that I like to start off with in terms of when starting the session. And one is we're to lie down and do a little bit of breath work so that we all come on board, because I'm very aware that we're pretty much all over the planet at the moment. New Zealand, Australia, Tasmania, Mexico, is it Mexico? No, Colombia, Mexico, Sweden,
UK,
Canada,
and Canada, and I'm also very aware that we're still very connected, and it's quite amazing how we can be through the screen. And so we'll start off doing a little bit of breath work, and also introduce you, if you're not familiar with it, just do a little bit of Qigong as well. And for me, those are really important parts of my practice and what I teach and share with people. Just some real simple patterns of movement that can be, I think, really supportive of us. Generally anyway, but even more so in this kind of very challenging times that we're having, and the breath is really underpins every pattern that we have in our bodies. So if we look at changing
the door was open, wasn't it?
Having a smoother breath.
Oh, okay. How'd she get in? That's a nice one.
I'm going to stick all you guys on mute now. Yeah. So okay, you're all on mute. If you need me, you need to wave, or you can probably unmute yourself if you want to say anything. So let's start off lying down on your backs, and find yourself comfortable. And when I say find yourself comfortable, really go for it. Make sure that you really take care of yourself. And comfort could be the softness of the floor, or you might like a firm floor. Position of your head and your neck, so that you're not either in flexion or extension. So there's a certain kind of in-between place for you. If you may be slightly compromised with your lower back, just having your knees, maybe a little bolster under your knees, can sometimes help with the lower back. And just while you're settling, allow as much as possible just for a quiet mind. And part of my practice, part of the things I teach, is how we can come into a quiet mind, or in Qigong, they call it a Qigong state of mind, and how quickly we can just let go of our daily activities, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, and coming just into now. And there are a number of things that can help support us coming into now. One's our body sensation. So come into feeling the touch sensation of you in relationship to the floor. Your heels, parts of your legs, lower legs, upper legs, buttocks, your back, scapula, your head. And using the floor and that connection to help just define for you some sensations, maybe even some shapes, terms of your body in contact with the floor. And another thing that we've been exploring a lot is just having our jaw very slightly open, and also our tongue gently resting on the base of our palate. And a curiosity for you to see if you do that with your jaw slightly open, tongue gently resting, if that changes the quality of your presence. And keeping your jaw gently open, tongue gently resting, come to the movement of your belly. And if you've done my breathing class, you'll know about the diaphragm and the whole relationship of movement of breath with the thoracic cage. But for a moment, just focusing on the movement of your belly as your diaphragm descends and your belly bulges on an inhale. And there's a slight pause, and the exhale's really just a letting go, a recoiling. So a little bit of effort involved with the inhale, little pause, having your exhale maybe just a slightly bit longer than your inhale. And for most of us, that just helps us come into a little bit more ease within the parasympathetic system, slowing your breath, slightly longer out breath. And for me, the length of the breath is not so important, but more important is the smoothness of breath. So having a smooth start to your inhale, smooth middle, smooth end, a smooth transition with a pause, and again a smooth exhale, beginning, middle and end. And keeping your primary focus with the rising and falling of your belly. You might feel sensations of clothing. You might feel the sensations of skin, muscles. Maybe you're feeling sensations of organs. Or even your spine, because on the inhale, your spine just gently moves closer towards the floor as we're lying down. And on an exhale, just returns its natural shape. So the belly breath is not just a frontal experience, it is three-dimensional. So there's movement towards the back and the sides. Keeping your mind as quiet as you can. And don't worry if your thoughts come. Don't worry if you get sidetracked. Just bring yourself back to the movement of your breath. And also recognizing that there's no right or wrong. In fact, the whole of the practice today, no right or wrong, just an inquiry, an experience, smooth inhale, smooth pause, smooth exhale. Keeping your jaw gently open, tongue gently resting. And just being as quiet as you possibly can with your mind's activity. Switch your attention now to the posterior part of your thoracic cage, your rib cage, the part that's in contact with the floor. And initiate your breath from your rib cage at the back. So most of the movement coming from your rib cage at the back. There'll obviously be some other movements happening in your body, but keep your focus there. The inhale, more pressure, more yielding into the floor. Pause and allow the exhale again to just be a recoiling of your body tissue, a letting go, maybe having your exhale just a little bit longer than your inhale, but well within a comfortable range. So you can keep the breath smooth as you can. Keep coming back to initiating the breath from your rib cage at the back, in contact with the floor. And now switch your attention to the lateral side of your rib cage, the side of your rib cage between the side of your body and your arms. And allow for the expansion to go laterally. As you inhale, there's a movement of your rib cage going laterally. The exhale is again just a recoiling of your body tissue. And if you're not very familiar with working at your thoracic cage, it does take quite a while to switch from a pattern, if you have a pattern of belly breathing, to thoracic breathing as well. So being patient with that, keeping your inquiry there. Lateral sides of your rib cage, keeping your jaw gently open, tongue gently resting on your palate. And again, just being as quiet as you can, being kind to yourself as well. It's one of the things that we've been working on a lot. It's just kindness. And now switch your attention to the front part of your rib cage, part that we're a little bit more intimately in touch with, probably. And the inhale, expansion towards the ceiling. Pause and an exhale, just a recoil and a letting go. Inhale, pause, exhale. And now your whole thoracic cage is one functioning unit, the front, the back, the sides, the up, the down. Initiating your breath from your thoracic cage. Maybe an inhale, count of 4, pause of 1, and an exhale, count of 6. And take your attention just a wee bit deeper. Go beneath the bones and go into the lung tissue itself. And initiate the breath and movement from the cells in the lung tissue and see if that changes your experience of your breath work and your presence with your breath work. Front, back, sides, up, down. Smooth as you can possibly make it. Smooth inhale, smooth pause, smooth exhale. Allowing yourself to be both here, present, and at the same time, that quality of just letting go. And then the last bit of the exploration of breath work for now, lying down. If you imagine that you have a ball or a sphere that's just below your xiphoid process, just below your rib cage, deep in your body. And that little ball, as it gets bigger, it expands upwards, downwards, sideways, forwards and back. And it takes into consideration the movement both of your belly, but also your thoracic cage too. And not being necessarily specific about where your breath is going, but allow that ball or that quality of that ball breathing in to expand and see where the movement goes for you. Not restricting your abdomen, not restricting your rib cage. Easeful, gentle, quiet, kind, present. Smooth inhale, smooth pause, smooth exhale. And then just start moving a little bit, coming back into more body sensations, maybe your fingers, toes, hands, arms, legs. And with the same care and attention, if you come to standing, and we'll do a little bit of Qigong work standing. And then after we've done a little bit of Qigong, we can have a little chat and we can talk about class and start the class. So the same kind of quality in standing for you. So the way that I like to explore standing is having your feet kind of parallel. And you'll see what I mean by kind of parallel when we look at some images of the skeleton and how different we might be from one side to another or from person to person. So kind of parallel. And about a fist width apart. And that fist width apart really has the weight of our body coming down our legs, coming down here through our hips, down to our feet. And if you have a little bit of space between your arms and the sides of your body, palms facing your thighs and your fingers just gently pointing towards the floor. And just to have a little sense of the position of your head and your neck. And stand for a moment with your jaw very gently open and your tongue gently resting on your palate. Just see if that changes things for you too. If you're happy to close your eyes too, please have your eyes closed. And come into the sensation of touch and contact with your soles of your feet with the floor. And start off by just wandering, feeling where most of your weight is. Is it on one leg or one foot? Can you feel it more on one side? Can you feel it more to the front or the back? Is there an even sensation? And allow yourself very gently to move forward and back, just enough so that you feel a bit of response from the fascia in your body. It doesn't have to be much. In fact, the smaller the movement, I think, in some ways is the better, because it enables us to really focus on some real subtleties. And so as you're moving forward, the things that are stopping you are often your default pattern, and the same as we're going back. So if you allow that tension that you feel to be your indication to move the opposite way, allow that to happen with a certain degree of softness, so there's not a hardness to the movement. And then come back to a relative stillness in a place that feels for you now neither forward nor back, that has a sense of maybe some uprightiness. Come to the sensations, feet on the floor, soften your toes, soften your tarsals, soften your ankles, and use the bones in your lower leg, the tibia and fibula, to help keep you upright in their length. Soften your knees. So the exploration really is, how can I use my skeleton really well and soften all the tissues around my joints so that I'm applying the least amount of effort to stand. Use your skeleton really well, from your knees soft to your hips, and the beautiful big bones of your femur keeping you upright in their length. Softening your feet, your ankles, your knees, your hips, lower back, sacrum, spine soft, and allowing your shoulders and your scapula just to dangle. And then the last thing here, again, just come to an awareness of your head and your neck. And now a little bit of movement left and right. Again, tiny bit. You don't have to do much. Just enough to feel what's going on the side of the lean, how the fascia comes into play to stop you going too far to the left. You can feel rolling sensations of your soles of your feet on the floor. Again, softening as much as you can. Maybe feeling your hips moving from one side to the other, your knees. And now come to a place that feels for you now neither forward nor back, nor left nor right. Come to the sensation of the top of your head, And just explore a little bit of movement of your skull on your first vertebra in your neck. And that weight now of your skull coming down the front of your spine, all the way going down your spine, the front of your spine, the weight-bearing part of your spine, all the way down through your hips, down your legs to the floor. So explore that position of your head and your neck, allowing your shoulders and arms to dangle, your thoracic cage to be soft, spine, lower back. So where's your default patterns? Do you keep tightening up in your shoulders? Or you keep tightening up in your buttocks? Do your legs tighten up? Can you keep that pattern going and keep letting go of those patterns that come in? Come into the sensation in your hips. And again, appreciating the sensations of your long bones in your legs. Your femur, softening your knees, the tibia and fibula, keeping you upright, softening your ankles and your feet. And if you were to stay here, you're not going to, but for another 20 minutes, what would you like to do to let go of something so that you can stay in your uprightedness with the least amount of physical effort? Keeping your jaw gently open, tongue gently resting on your palate. See if that changes things for you too. And we're going to do 3 Qigong exercises. If you are familiar, please do it in your own pace. You can follow me. If you're not, I'll go through it a few times. I'm going to start off doing something that's called lifting the sky. So I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to put my head forwards. My arms are now extended. My fingers are pointing towards each other. My palms are facing the floor, my fingers open. On an inhale, I'm lifting my arms up, looking through my fingers. When I'm vertical, I'm still looking through my fingers. I pause with my breath. I push up, lifting the sky, and then I exhale, coming down with my arms and my head in one movement. And I'll show you and talk to you through that. Again, I'll do it sideways if that helps. Palms facing the floor, fingers towards each other. I'm looking down at my fingers. Inhale as I'm coming up. Pause with my breath. Push up, lifting the sky. And exhale. So the breathing in through your nose, exhaling through your mouth. And just keep that pattern going just for a little while. So that you become really familiar with it. It's not going to change. Inhaling through your nose, exhaling through your mouth. And when you kind of feel, oh, I kind of get what's going on here now, just maybe allow the kind of sensations of your arms kind of floating up in water. So you take away even more of the physicality of doing this movement. And when you come more into that energy flow, the form becomes slightly less important, and more so just that sensation of kind of just seaweed just floating up into the water, coming to the surface, pausing with your breath, lifting up to the sky, arms coming down, inhaling through your nose, exhaling through your mouth with the jaw gently open, tongue gently resting on your palate. Taking the effort out of, I'll rephrase that, taking the unnecessary effort out of the movement as much as you can. So we're really cost effective with supply of oxygen and blood around the body. And a couple more times and then Bring your arms back down by your sides, coming back to standing, and see what that feels like for you to stand. And just take yourself on a journey through parts of your body that you feel it's important for you to come in contact with, whether it's your head or your neck or your shoulders. Coming back into your skeleton and using your skeleton really efficiently for standing. Quiet in your mind, quiet in your body. And the next one we're going to do is now called Carrying the Moon. And I'll show you again. So I'm going to bend forwards a bit more. My palms are cupped and they're just above my knee, that sort of place. And then as I inhale, I'm bringing my arms up in front of me with my palms cupped. I pause with my breath here, carrying the moon, and then I exhale, arms coming to the sides. I'll show you side on. If you're familiar, please just go ahead. So I'm bending forwards a bit, inhaling, coming up, pausing with the breath, carrying the moon, exhale. And continue in that movement in your own pace. And again, the same pattern is breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, jaws gently open, tongue gently resting on your palate. And when you become again familiar with the movement, just allow yourself just to feel like you're kind of seaweed again, just floating up in water. Keeping the form there, but not so tight with the form. And applying yourself so the least amount of physical effort, real easy. And then when your arms are next by your sides, again, come back to standing. See what that feels like. Is it easier? Are you more challenged? Has it brought up some tension somewhere? Coming to your feet, just feel your long bones in your legs keeping you upright. And the position that you are in terms of your leaning forward or leaning back or side. So you come to a place that is as neutral as possible for you. There'll always be some little swaying because it's not being like a military upright. There's always some uprightness that happens. Keeping your legs soft but upright, softening your buttocks and your thighs, softening your shoulders, jaw very gently open, tongue gently resting. And then the last one we'll do is beautiful butterflies dancing in front of flowers. And again, if you're familiar with this, please go ahead and I'll show you. This time I'm bending forwards quite a bit more. I'll show you twice, front on and side on. And on an inhale, my arms come up. My palms are now facing the ceiling. I'm looking up at the sky. On the pause of my breath, there's a transition, and the transition is my head faces forward and my palms face the floor, and then I exhale coming down. I'll show you sides on, and I'll talk through it again. Beautiful butterflies dancing in front of flowers. Inhaling, pausing, transition, exhale. I'll talk through once more, you can follow me. Inhale coming up. Beautiful butterflies dancing in front of flowers. Pause with the breath. Transition, head, hands, exhale. So I'll keep doing the movement. You can follow me if you feel you need to. I love that transition place of the breath. Inhaling. Exhale. The exhale is a little bit like as though you would be doing on your glasses. But it doesn't have to be audible, but just enough so you get a. And again, take the effort out of the movement. Imagine that you're this beautiful light butterfly whose wings are just opening up, dancing in front of flowers, having this beautiful transition, easeful. And a couple more times and then just come back to standing again. Quiet. And place your hands, both hands on your belly, just about 2 to 3 inches below your belly button, on your dantian, on your hara. Sea of chi. And smile from your heart. Smile from your heart. And rubbing your hands together, dabbing your eyes, massage your head, shake an arm and leg, have a little walk around the room, and we'll come back to seated. I'll unmute you guys too. Sometimes it doesn't unmute, does it? It's funny. If you guys want to unmute yourselves, for some reason it's not working, and if you do want to... Hello, everybody.
Acabado mi vida.
So if you are now unmuted, please be mindful of noises in the background. If you do have children,
Después de estudiar todo tu postre,
please mute
vayas a
yourself.
estudiar.
Who's the noisy one with the children? How was that, guys?
Fantastic.
That's the way I like to start the day.
Yes.
For me, it kind of just sets the tone for my own yoga, particularly in the mornings. In the evening, I'm a little bit more different with my yoga, but that's the way I like to start the day, really. Anyone want to make any comments and sharing? No. Yes, Patricia.
This is the second time that I did it,
Yes.
this exercise with you, and it felt more deep inside me.
Nice.
More fluent, more deep, more, touch my feelings.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, there's certain things that I think are good to do repetitively because you do go deeper into it and not necessarily having to look at learning new things. And I do these 3, and I do some other Qigong as well, but these 3 particular ones every day. And I have done for about 3 years. And it changes. It has to change. Everything has a consequence. If you do this every day for 3 years, it has to have a consequence. And if you don't do it, that has a consequence. And the consequence is that it gets easier. And it's, you can spend just 5 minutes a day doing this. You don't have to spend a long time. Whether you're a new person to Qigong, whether you're advanced, you only need to spend a few minutes. It's quite difficult to have an agitated mind while you're doing it. So, any other things? Any other comments? No. So we're
Si
going
quieres
to.
más agua de canela, aquí tengo, amor.
Hey, what's going on? Was that you, Olivia? No, it wasn't. Wasn't the right kind of voice. So we're going to look at the skeleton and take ourselves on a journey through the skeleton. And I've got some slides that I'll start off showing you. I've been working with the bones since the early 90s. So I qualified as an acupuncturist in 1985. And in 92, I started studying a bodywork technique called zero balancing, which was the thing that really took my attention and still is really, although I've moved away from the zero balancing world and have created my own story around the bones from my own experience. So some of that also comes from a long time doing Vipassana meditation and more recently doing work with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and also some work with Amy Matthews, who are both huge inspirations for me. And I'm delving a little bit more into the embryological aspect of our existence really and our creation. So the bones have been fascinating for me in terms of the body work that I do is working directly with the skeleton and allowing an engagement with the skeleton that can facilitate change and easement of body, mind, emotions. And the skeleton has a different quality to it than the soft tissue. But what I will do, I'll share my screen and I'll just go through some little slides. And you need to make sure that you can see the screen. Can everyone see that? Put a thumbs up. Cool. Yeah. Cool. So, and I'll go. We can go through these, and you can talk as well at the same time. You can add your insights as well. So we're going to look at skeletal variations, range of motion of a joint. Skeletal variations that we're going to look at in a minute, fascinating. I think it will blow you away seeing some of these images that I've got for you. We're going to look at range of motion of a joint, of joints, which is really key in terms of a lot of it, in terms of safety of movement. Okay, so the skeleton. So this is you inside. It's fantastic, isn't it? It always blows me away, knowing that this is in me, below my skin and flesh, and but it's a live tissue. And we won't go through all the things that do happen within the skeleton and particularly the spine, but it's amazing, alive tissue. And there's two major aspects that we can look at with the spine. One is called the axial, which is our axis, it's our core. And classically it's the spine, which is our main core support. The cervical, the thoracic and the lumbar, and also the coccyx, but we'll talk about that also in a minute. And they also call the skull part of the axial, and I've got face in brackets here because we'll talk about that, and the sacrum, and also the ribs, and I've got a question mark there for us just to be curious about those. So that the axis or the axial, that's our core, it's around which something moves, it's our main support, it's our self. And the axial part of the skeleton is the transmission of forces. It also protects our organs. So if we look at the rib cage here, this is very protective of our organs. You've also got here the sacrum here, which is protective of our organs down here, but more so the ribs here. There's a stability that's afforded to us from the axial, but it's most stable when it's neutral. So the explorations that we were doing standing and the explorations of doing the Qigong look at that stability, but more in a neutral place. So if the spine is not in neutral, then it's less stable. And we'll talk about the curves of the spine as well in a minute. And it's around which things move, which takes us on to the appendicular or the appendages we'll talk about in a minute. Relates much to who we are. So this is who we are in our body and our core issues. And bones generally relate to ancestral issues, and particularly if you look at Chinese medicine as well. And from that core, we have our appendicular, the appendages, which is the more freely movable part, our extremities. This is our shoulders, our arms, our hands, our pelvis, legs and feet, also our jaw and our hyoid bone. And so the appendicular part is about relationships and environment. This is how I communicate with the world. I go foraging for food, I check what's going on, my relationship with my walking, in relationship to the earth. It's basically about survival, sources of nourishment. This is how we are in the world. So in terms of the axial and the appendicular, you can kind of say this is who we are, or how we are with who we are. Relationship with our core. In terms of if you look at relationships and how we reach out, if you look at the skull being part of the axial, we could look at the face as being part of the appendage. This is me reaching out because I communicate through my face, through my jaw, through eating, grasping things. The sacrum, although it's part of the axial, really doesn't form fully until we're about 25 years old. So everything that happens up until about 25, there is still some change and movement of the sacrum. And although part of the axial, it does change its shape. So it's influenced by our early years. And the ribs also. The ribs embryologically come from the spine. So they're classed as being part of the axial skeleton. But in terms of our relationship and movement, you could also look at that as being part of the appendicular or the appendage. And we'll do some explorations around this so you can have some experience with that. You okay for me to move on? Shout if you...
Okay.
Spinal column. Any comments? No? So we're born in flexion, you know that, we're all curled up, and we have the primary curves, which are the thoracic curve or the kyphotic curves, the pelvic and thoracic curves. And then as we start to crawl, we start to develop a cervical curves in our neck. It develops after 3 or 4 months. And then we come to seated. And then when we come to standing, we start to develop a lumbar curve here. So we're born with this curve, the thoracic curve, the pelvic curve, that kyphotic shape, start to crawl, start to develop this curve in your neck, and then standing, then the whole spine is functioning as a whole unit. And Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen and Body Mind Centering and Amy Matthews talks a lot about the 6 curves of the spine, and I like this a lot. If you look at the shape of the head here, this is called the AO, or this is like the first cervical vertebra. So if you look at the shape here of the head and the position of the head, if we were to tilt the head back even more, you can see how that will influence the shape of the neck here. And if the head was tilted forward, the shape of the neck, the curve might not be so great. So this place here is quite important, and also because of the way that the skull here sits on the atlas, the first vertebra. So let's call this the first curve of the spine. the neck the second, the thoracic the third, the lumbar the fourth, the sacrum the fifth, and then the coccyx has another lordotic curve because it's slightly curved like this. And if you think of us when we were monkeys, we would have this tail, and it would be part of our appendage of the way that we communicate with the world. And it does move. It moves when we go to the toilet. It moves when we childbirth. So there is some movement here available. And the curves of the spine, they go from kyphotic to lordotic to kyphotic to lordotic, kyphotic, lordotic. And these support our body weight and give us support with that curve. And you've got this kind of central line that's going down here. And if for instance, your thoracic curve was really big, you'd probably find that all the other curves would be a lot bigger as well. I remember teaching this last year when I did a tour of the South Island with my bone yoga, and this girl came up to me and was talking about this massive curve of her lumbar spine. And she said to me, how can I straighten my curve? And I looked at her whole spine, and all the curves in her body had these beautiful curves. And I said, you don't need to change anything. Your curve with your spines are all functioning well with the whole shape of your spine. And I hope that just gave her the permission to be okay with how her spine shape is. I'm going on. Shout if you want a question. Okay, really important part of the spine also is the junctions. Cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum. So here where you've got your lumbar, and we're going to explore some of this movement as well. You've got the lumbar, and here you've got the thoracic lumbar junction. It's where the spine changes mainly in its shape. So the lumbar spine, the facets are vertical, which allows me to forward bend, allows me to backward bend with quite a lot of ease. I can also side bend quite a lot as well, but rotation is only about 5%, up to 5%. And above that, the thoracic spine here, the facets are oblique, which allows for rotation. And then when you come to the neck, you have again this oblique nature, and there's that ability to rotate your neck. So these rotational forces from your neck and your thoracic spine come down, and they get transferred down into the lumbar spine. And there's often a lot of tension that is felt between particularly the thoracic lumbar junction here. And we'll explore some of that movement in a little while. So this is quite key in terms of how our spine works and how well we can use our spine. And it has a lot to do with the range of motion of joints. And this is important. So if you have a joint, you've got a range of motion of a joint, which we could call the TROM. And the TROM means the total range of motion. So if you were to take your joint through the total range of motion, you would damage your joint. It's taking it through its range, irrespective of the muscles, the tendons, the fascia, and particularly the ligaments. But within the total range of motion of a joint, you have the voluntary range of motion here. And the voluntary range of motion is the motion that I can do voluntary myself. So easiest way to do that, and if you want to just do this with me so you get the experience, if I look at the voluntary range of motion of my wrist. So as I bend my wrist like this, this is my voluntary range. And then there gets a place where it starts to engage, which is now the end range of my voluntary range of motion. And if I press a little bit more with my other hand, I'm going gently now into my involuntary end range of motion. Does that make sense? So this is the voluntary range, and you see the freedom here, that movement, and I get now to the end range, and you feel it, you feel some fascia, you feel some ligaments biting in. And if I had to press a bit more, I then go into the slightly involuntary end range of motions where the ligaments here start to engage. And any further, then you have the possibility of damaging your joints. And this is really important in terms of yoga, in terms of movement, that you understand your ligamental tensions. You understand where your joints have reached their voluntary range of motion. You can go gently into the end range, but any deeper, you have the chances of damaging the joint, which happens a lot in yoga when people are using their body weight in a certain asana, and that body weight then takes them too far, and you can quite easily damage a joint. So interestingly enough, the bones and the ligaments are both subconscious tissues. So I can't move my bones consciously, and I can't move my ligaments consciously. The ligaments are made of collagen fiber. There's a certain degree of elasticity that there is in the ligaments. They are affected by our emotions, and they are affected by environmental influences. And this we can talk about, we might talk about a bit more, but relates a lot into Chinese medicine. In terms of the liver energy, the liver rules over the ligaments in your body. And so, and the ligament and the emotion associated with the liver is anger and frustration. So there can be tightness or there can be too much looseness. So interestingly enough, so the ligaments here where they start to engage is your subconscious. So if you take a joint through its range of motion to the end range and slightly into the involuntary end range, you're going slightly deeper into your subconscious. So in terms of yoga, you could term that as being expanding your consciousness. So what was conscious to you, if you increase your range of motion of a joint, means that more of you is conscious. Let me just go back to this one to see if there's anything. There's a lot we can talk to about the nature of the bones. We won't go into today. The spine in particular is important because it protects our nervous system. It's our structure support. There are attachments to our organs and also our arms and legs. It relates also to our midline from left to right, because we're not symmetrical. It's really important to realize that we're not symmetrical. What you can do on one side of your body, you might not be able to do on the other side. Our spine, for instance, the facets on the right side of our spine tend to be a little bit more oblique, which means that when I rotate to my left, that the facets don't engage so quickly. And this is probably to do with the way that we spiral down into the earth. It probably has something to do with us being more right-handed. And it probably has something to do with the weight of our organs inside, because again, our organs aren't symmetrical. We have 2 lobes of lungs on our left side. We have 3 on our right side. We have our liver mainly on our left side, although it does come into your belly. We have our spleen on the left side. So all the time there's this kind of over-evolution. That might be the reason why our spine is also different from one side to another. So when we do some rotation, if you feel it engage more one side, this is just natural for us. We'll do this exploration in a while. Obviously the spine supports our head and it keeps up our organs from underneath. Acts as a shock absorber as well, because we've got all the what's the names in the joints? I can't think what the word is. The discs in the joints, pathways for our nerves and for movement. Okay, so Before we go on to the slides, any comments? You can say anything, raise a hand, make a noise, ask me in a minute. Okay, let's go on. Okay, look at this. I hope this will blow you away. So look at the left hip here. Look at the socket of the joint here and how it's pointed downwards. So this is the hip joint. Your ball of your socket joint goes in here. And look at the right one here, that it's almost pointed sideways and almost horizontal. So if you were to go into the full lotus position, I reckon this person could do this slightly easier than this person. Or if you were to do some movement of your hip joint, I mean, look at the different, just in terms of this joint of the flexibility that this person will have on the right, that this person will here on the left will never ever be able to do, regardless of how much they want to or how much a yoga teacher might want to push them to do something that is termed as being yogically kind of right. Okay, look at these two. Again, the difference in the hip socket. Look at this one here and this one here. I reckon this is probably more me. So the range of the motion that's affordable to the hips is just phenomenally different, just in relationship to the shape, the ball and socket joint. Who would have thought? The hip sockets on the right side are not visible. See here, where's the hip joint? You can't see it here, but you can see the hip joint here. And even this one here, look how different that one is and to this one. So this person will probably be able to do full lotus on the left side, but not necessarily on the right side. And this person here will probably have struggles doing both. Amazing, isn't it? I think so. Take a look at this then. So we've been looking at the hip joint, and now let's look at the orientations here of the 6 femurs. So this is the ball and socket joint here. This is your knee. So if you look at the shape, so they're lying down in the same position. So this one is more right angled. Look how this one comes forward more. Look at this one almost pointing completely forward, almost at right angles. We're going to see too close. Oh, you can see it from this angle. Look. So, you know, you see some people who stand with their feet splayed wide. This would probably be these people here. And this person wouldn't be able to splay their feet wide. This person might be pigeon-toed. Completely different bony structures. There's no Mr. and Mrs. norm. So the Mr. and Mrs. norm that we see on diagrams of the skeleton, they don't exist. This is what we're like inside. Have a look at this. These are the 2 last ones that were on the right side. Look at the different shapes. I think this one looks a little bit more like my left hip. I think I've got some stuff going on here as well. Some deterioration here around the hip joint. You can't get these 2 people to do the same thing, can you? You can see it's just, we have to understand. And when people say do your own yoga, this is why you need to do your own yoga and work within your own understandings and limitations. How about that? That's crazy, isn't it? How this one goes at right angles and this one's more oblique, slightly longer as well. Same here, quite fascinating, the length also. This one's quite, this is probably a shorter person, looks like a taller person. So this is looking at the humerus bone. And you can see how this bone's rotated more. So the ability to rotate your hands are going to be also very different. You know, when some people are lying down on their backs with their palms facing up, some people, their hands are a bit like this. Well, that's probably to do, not necessarily, it might obviously to do with tight fascia, tight muscles if you don't use it, but it's very possibly, or it will have something to do with these orientations as well. Okay, let's look at the scapula as well. So the two right scapula, and the chromium process here on the left, it doesn't cover the shoulder joint here, but this acromion process covers the whole of that shoulder joint. The shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint, but with a very shallow basin, different to the hip joint, which is more firm. The hip joint, if it doesn't dislocate, it would more likely break. But you can see the shallow nature here of the joint would be a tendency to dislocate. So in terms of looking at abduction or rotation, abduction of your arms, look how easier it will be for this person than this person. Limited because of the shape of the skeleton. Two right scapula, the left one, probably be able to clasp your hands easier behind your back. You know, some people can put their hands behind their back and do this shape with their hands. This person here is going to probably not be able to do that. Doesn't matter how much they practice, how much they get rid of the tightness in their tissues, in the muscles and in the fascia, and increase their range of motion of the ligaments, there's still going to be two very distinct movements possible. So these are three right shoulder sockets in the scapula, and the vertical axis is very, very different. The vertical axis. And again, the acromion process here, how different they are. Amazing, isn't it? I think it is.
Yes.
And then here again, scapula. Scapula is really important, and having the scapula sits on your spine, sits on your rib cage. And every time we move our arm, the scapula moves. If you can't move your scapula, you can't move your arms. Done. There is this movement. So the free floating nature of the scapula above your ribs is really important. We focus a lot on that when we do bone yoga as well. And again, looking at the acromion on the left side, it doesn't cover the shoulder joint at all, and this one does. Again, lifting your arms vertical are going to be very different. This shows the lumbar spine and the gaps between the spinous processes, how different they are. Here, look at this. So the lumbar spine, the gap between the spinous processes here are a lot bigger, which means that I can bend backwards more in my lumbar spine before the spinous processes touch, where the thoracic spine is designed so that they touch a bit quicker so that I can't backward bend. Your spinous processes after about the age of 55 grow, so backward bending for about 85% of people becomes more restricted as you get older. So this restriction's there for a purpose, because it means that I don't bend backwards enough to damage my internal organs. So it's there for a purpose. And this is just a view of, do I have another one after that? Yeah. And this is a view of the different shapes of the sacrum. Look at that, how tall. You can imagine this being a tall, skinny person. This would be probably a smaller, squat person, and this is an in-between person. I don't know. But again, just the different shapes. And then if we come on to this, originally 5 fused bones that fuse in the womb. And they're again different shapes. Look at the curve here. And look at the almost no curve there.
Fascinating.
Fascinating. Okay. How was that? Makes you think, doesn't it? Makes you
Wow.
think what's going on inside. Every joint in your body is going to be different. Every joint's not going to be symmetrical one side to the other. You might be able to do one arm better than the other. I mean, don't mean better. That's really wrong thing to say, isn't it? Better. Because that's where we come into that kind of competition that I should be able to lift my arm up. But if you know that well, there's two ways to do it. One is just through our own internal experience and understanding of range of motions of a joint. And then the other one would be if we would have x-rays. And you could say, oh, well, I'm never going to try and teach you to do full lotus because it's an impossibility. And then if you look at the really strict trainings, you know, the Iyengar style trainings of how everyone was trying to be an Iyengar person, can't do it. He was he was able to do all these things. I could never do that. Anybody want to make any comments? So definitely don't listen to your teacher. Don't listen to yourself. Tell you, you know, if you're doing a big class, be really mindful. Yeah, I've got you, Jacqueline. Be really mindful of your own space, Jacqueline.
I was going to say, Iyengar gave my teacher a hiatus hernia through forcing her to turn round. I mean, he just put his hands on. He would move bodies.
Yeah.
And that spinal rotation that we do in bone yoga,
yeah,
he gave her hiatus hernia by pushing her into the right position, into what he said was the right position.
Yeah, yeah. I never adjust people. I don't do a lot of classic yoga anyway. If I were to adjust people, I would put the lightest touch for encouragement, but I want the person's own body wisdom their own wisdom to understand what I'm trying to get them to achieve. What am I trying to get someone to achieve anyway in movement? So it looks like the textbook Mr. and Mrs. Norm doing yoga, or that it, you know, or that it looks like me. I would never look like the norm. I wouldn't be on a fancy cover of a glossy magazine doing yoga. Why not? But, you know, my yoga is like, you know, when I do my yoga and I go, I feel that have more range of motion, it's still not anywhere near someone that's got this massive flexibility. Interesting. Anybody else? Just going to have a look at the comments. Millions of yoga, yeah. So let's do a little bit of exploration looking at movement of the spine. So who's having an x-ray tomorrow? Oh, you had a fall. Well, interesting to, sorry to hear that. It'd be interesting to see your skeleton, won't it? Have a look at it in terms of what we've just been doing. It's a very good time to go and have an x-ray, that's for sure. And if you have broken it, just go onto YouTube and look at sounds for breakages, because there are certain megahertz that are good for certain sounds for different illnesses as well. So sound is really good. Good luck for that. So let's come to kneeling down. So we can look at, if you're not comfortable kneeling, you can sit down. So the next kind of 40 minutes that we're going to have together is going to be primarily just some exploration work for you. And we'll take into consideration pretty much all that we've looked at. If you're uncomfortable seated like this, please sit on a bolster or a cushion as well. And just allow yourself to be more present in your new position. And again, you can also just think of your head and your neck. But don't forget, if my head's bent back like this, I spent most of my life with my neck like this. It's a family thing. And maybe it's because we felt we were small and we needed to look up, or I don't quite know what it might be. But then if you look at that shape that we were talking about, how that's going to start to affect the curve in my neck, which then will affect all the curves in my body, because my rest of my spine has to compensate for the position of my head. So just while there's not a lot that we can do in terms of gentle readjustments or positions, but you can think about not necessarily think about, but feel, if you can, just the position of your skull sitting here on your atlas. There's a tiny little bit of movement that you can adjust. It's very difficult. It needs a little bit of training, but it's possible to feel that position, and also the position of your neck, and a little bit forward and back. That's about all we need to really look at here in our kneeling position. Also, maybe your shoulders just dangling. So the first thing that we're going to do, and if you've done this with me or you've done some bone yoga with me, you'll be familiar. But maybe it has a different image for you now in terms of us going through the range of motion in a bit more detail. So remember the range of motion of a joint, and I spoke about the spine being, I don't know if you can see this as well. So here we've got, let me try and show you. I need to get some easier spines to move around. This is Rangi, by the way. So you can see these beautiful curves of the spine. And if you look at the lumbar spine here, 5 lumbar vertebrae. I don't know if you can see, I will point with a pen, but you might be able to just see enough. The facets here are vertical. They go up like this. I'm not sure how well you can see. I can't really take this spine off. And then you've got the thoracic lumbar junction, which is about, it can vary where it is, but the nature of the thoracic is that they become oblique here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to rotate, first off, we're going to rotate just our lumbar, so you can feel when the fascia engage. And then what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the thoracic and the cervical spine as well, and have that relationship. But the relationship is well within a comfortable range of motion for ourselves. And just one little other view of the spine, because we'll probably do some work with that as well, is looking at this bulky part of the spine, the weight-bearing part of the spine. So this bulky front of the spine, there's the anterior longitudinal ligaments, the front of the spine, keeping the spine from concertinaing up, because they're under constant pressure from these, I forgot the name again, that's so funny, the discs in between. So if you were to cut the longitudinal ligaments, your spine would just concertina up. And if you were to cut the anterior longitudinal ligaments, your spine would concertina down. So there's an energy that's within the spine all the time that's wanting to keep you upright. And also there's that softening. So in terms of yoga, you've got the terminology sthira and sukha, which is stability and ease. So yoga, if you do yoga really well, it combines stability and it has ease. And for me, it's doing the least amount of effort possible to do what you need to do well. Okay, coming back to kneeling down. So, lumbar, we've got this movement here. So the way that we can explore this is if keeping your head and torso facing forward, just place one hand behind your back. Maybe do your right hand, and then I can talk you through it if you don't mind doing your right hand behind your back. And you can either have it dangling behind you, but I like to just put my finger in between my toes at the back so then I can just relax my shoulder. I'm still facing forwards. My head is still facing forwards. And then I place my other hand on my left hand on my right thigh, still facing forwards. And now what I want to do, still facing forwards, is just rotate my lumbar. See how if you feel your head and upper body go into the side, just come back to facing forwards. So there's a free movement. Don't forget we looked at the range of motion of a joint, the free movement of the composite nature of the lumbar, and you can feel it start to engage and then pause and come back. So let's spend a little bit of time just with the lumbar. The lumbar takes a lot of battering. If I'm doing some kind of digging, I've got rotational forces of my upper back, and then my lumbar comes in and it has to stop because I can't rotate so much. So those forces get locked in the lumbar and can cause a bit of lots of discomfort. So once you've keep exploring the lumbar, and if you find somewhere that's a bit tight, can you just stay with that and soften? Either go very gently into where it feels tight or come out of some tightness. Because I believe there's a place or places that if we hold the tension really well and mindfully in a way that your body doesn't react but responds, that there's greater potential for letting go. And once you've explored that movement of your lumbar, then start to rotate your thoracic spine and see if you can do it vertebra by vertebra. Lower spine, mid-spine, upper spine, and then your neck. And then return your neck, return your upper thoracic spine, mid, lower, lumbar, and back to looseness. So just taking the spine on a movement through its whole rotation in relationship to the facets and that sensation that you feel. Don't go too deep into it because you can do that in other yoga. So just be gentle with that movement. And this not only just works at your spine, it works your ribs, it works with all the muscles attachments to the spine, it works at the organs attachments to the spine. And the idea is to look at whether you can do this incrementally, vertebra by vertebra. But please don't be too fussed. The most important thing is that we don't feel like we're failing, because there's no right nor wrong. There's just a way that we explore. Now swap hands over so that your left hand is behind your back, still keeping your torso and head facing forwards. Your right hand is on your opposite thigh. And again, start off just by engaging your lumbar. And the curiosity for you is it more, does it engage quicker? Do I feel some more tension somewhere? Is it easier to rotate here so that I have to do more of a rotation to feel the sensations of ligamental engagement? If you're really flexible, either just creates an internal tone or also just engage a bit more, and then from that engagement rotation of your lumbar, then start rotating your lower back, lower thoracic spine, mid-thoracic spine, upper neck, and then recoil. It doesn't have to be perfect in terms of its rotation. You might move your neck before your upper back. Doesn't matter really. What really matters is that we're creating some sense of ease, that we're not fighting with anything, we're not going into too deep into engagement so you have to react. We want us to respond. Well, I do anyway. This is what I like to share. And then just come back to having your palms on your thighs again just for a moment. If you feel like you need to move and stand up and stretch or sit on a cushion, please feel free to do that as well. We're going to stay kneeling for a tiny bit longer. So this time, placing your right hand behind your back, left hand on your opposite thigh. Do the movement. We do a number of these explorations. Do the movement of rotation, lumbar, thoracic, and your cervical from your spine. So do it from the actual vertebra. See if that just changes the way you move in your relationship. So have this as a, can I initiate the movement from my spine? Your muscles have to get involved, but the initiation or that sense of that, does that change your experience being a bony movement? And does that change your inner experience and your inner world of your rotation of your spine? Swapping hands over, same again. Working from the spine. We're going to do another 2 of these and experience working differently. This time again, the spine. So for me, going to the left, I need to engage my ligaments. There's a lot more movement. And I know that if I'm shoveling and digging, I will do it more this way as well. So there'll be an influence of that movement, not so much this way, because I'm right-handed. And then coming back to hands on your thighs again, just for a moment. And then placing your one hand behind your back again and the other one on the other leg. And this time moving your spine from your muscles. Does that change your experience? Again, looking at lumbar, thoracic, cervical, from your muscles. And swapping sides over. And work from your muscles. It doesn't have to be hard muscular, but just initiating the movement from that place that we're more familiar with, because we're very muscle orientated in the world. We're very muscle orientated in yoga and movement, which is why I just love and enjoy that fascination around the bones. But muscles are an integral part of the way we work. Coming back to facing forwards again, swapping hands over. And this time do the rotation. And again, see if you can do it lumbar, thoracic, cervical. But this time do the movement with kindness. Be really kind in your movement. And does that change your inner experience, your inner world? Are you moving slower, faster? Is it more mindful? Is it softer? What is that flavor of kindness doing for you as your experience? See how many choices that we have when we do something. Swapping sides over. being kind in your movement, moving from kindness. And then coming back to hands on your thighs. We could do so many different explorations. We could move from the ribs. We could move from our lungs. You could do rotation leading from your heart or from your shoulders. But let's come into a cat-cow position so that we can get off our knees for a while. And if you're uncomfortable in the cat-cow position for any reason, please modify it. You can do this seated if you want. It's way easier if we're doing cat-cow. And while you're in the cat-cow position, and technically it tends to be your hips above your knees and your shoulders above your wrists. But if your wrists are really tight, you might want to be a little bit more oblique with your position of your arms. And just take a little moment to feel the sensations of your hands on the floor, particularly your bones in your fingers, bones in your hands, in your tarsals, and your wrists, and feeling the long bones in your arm and radius, also keeping you upright. In the same way we were exploring with the legs. So softening your wrists and your hands, softening your elbows, also appreciating your femur bone, your humerus bone, keeping you in your cat-cow position, softening as much as possible your shoulders and scapula. Needs to be a little bit of engagement. The same with your thighs, your sacrum, your ilium, the whole of that area, and the weight going down your femur bone into your knees. Then your feet, whether they're tucked or just lying flat, are also an important part of this. And start off doing some very gentle little circles in your hips. So you can either move your ilium around your hip joint or your hip joint around your ilium. And have those circles, gentle circles. Don't go too deep into sensations. And while you're doing those circles, just for a moment, see what your knees are doing. They're mimicking that circle. The feet, what are your feet doing? Mimicking the circle. Your hands. There's all that movement that's happening here, also in your hands and your shoulders. And while you're doing that circle movement of your hips, this is moving your appendicular part of your spine, your lower part, arms are moving, but also allow some movement to go up your spine, maybe a little bit of a snake-like movement going up your spine. So your spine, and classically the cat-cow is keeping your appendicular still, and moving the axial part of the skeleton. And we're looking now at moving both. Snake-like movement going up your spine, and also add some classic cat-cow to the movement. If you feel a bit uncomfortable staying in cat-cow for too long, please move and come back to the position so that you can carry on just exploring. And now come to a little bit of relative stillness. And do some cat-cowy kind of movement just from your spine. So keeping your shoulder girdle and your pelvic girdle creating the firmness and the stability. And as you're doing your cat-cow, can you now lead from your rib cage, not from your spine? But lead from your rib cage as if it were part of your relationship to the outside world, part of your appendages, your appendicular, so you relate to the world through moving your rib cage, and how that might change your experience of movement. And now shifting your attention and having your rib cage as part of your structure, your core. And if it's then part of your core, does that change the way you do some movement with your cat-cow? It doesn't have to be classic cat-cow. And now shift your attention to leading from your skull, the base of your skull in terms of its relationship to the way it connects with your atlas. And initiating some movement coming from your skull, maybe incorporating movement through your spine, all the way down to your coccyx. So this is just an exploration of ways that we can experience the internal fabric of the skeleton. How about leading from your tail? Imagine your tail was really long and that you can change the shape and see if you tuck in, how that starts to affect all the shapes and movements of your spine above. And then for a moment coming back to some relative stillness. And let's just do momentarily a down dog. And so feeling your hands, connection on the floor, gently pushing down with your hands so you feel that connection with your shoulder, and come up momentarily into a down dog. And in your down dog, you can do a little bit of pedaling around. If you're not comfortable doing a down dog, please don't do that. You don't have to. And then come to allowing your knees to come to the mat, about width of the mat, and sink down just momentarily into an extended child pose with your arms extended. And treating your extended child pose as if it were a restorative posture. So and while you're lying down in your extended child pose, breathe into your lungs at the back, taking into consideration that our lung tissue are bigger at the back than they are at the front. And as we're slightly compressed in our front part of our body and our abdomen, taking the breath and using that freedom that there is in your thoracic cage and in your lung tissues at the back. And if you have maybe some tension somewhere, you can also look at letting go of some tensions, maybe by using your breath and mind. And if it's a bit challenging for you to take your breath to your lung tissues or to your thoracic cage at the back, just persevere for a while, because it takes a while to shift one's attentions and change old patterns of breath. And if you're a belly breather, you might keep finding that your attention keeps coming back to your breathing of your belly. And you can see how that is a bit restricted by the shape that your body is in. And then just find yourself just coming over to lying on your side, and then lying down on your back, and having yourself kind of comfortable. We're going to do a little bit of movement as well. And start doing some movement that is initiated from the axial part of your skeleton. So this is your spine, this is your skull, particularly the back part of your skull, your sacrum. Just some kind of movement, whatever that movement is for you, whether it's a little bit of a movement or a lot of movement. And as you're moving your axial skeleton, can you also feel some relationship that that has with the appendicular part of your skeleton too? And maybe using or having a sense that your rib cage is part of your axial skeleton too. And in terms of the axial skeleton, if the rib cage is part of that, there's some sort of stability there. So it could be either appendicular, it could be axial, and it's really just your own internal experience of that and the way that you're using yourself and your spine. And now shift your attention so that your rib cage is now part of your appendicular. So this is your relationship with the world, which is breathing in and breathing out. And seeing how your arms maybe also become more involved with this as part of your communication of your appendages that come from your spine, from your thoracic cage. And you can start moving your arms around in a fashion that works for you. And maybe also look at how your pelvic girdle wants to maybe become involved too as part of your relationship to the outside world, that includes your legs all the way down to your feet. And also, what about if you use also your face as well and your jaw as part of your relationship to the outside world, and carry on doing your movements, but what is it like if you initiate that movement from your jaw, because it is part of our relationship with the outside world when we take in food, having milk from your mother. And then what's it like if you initiate the movement from your coccyx and having the sense of that your coccyx is also your extended tail. And then coming back into some relative stillness. And we'll do just a few minutes Shavasana together, and then we'll do some talking. So find yourself comfortable lying down. If you feel that you might lose some of your body temperature, please put a little blanket or something on you, or a jumper. Think about your head and your neck position. And just allowing yourselves just to soften both as much as possible in your mind and your body, coming back to that quiet place. And if it is available for you, also just to allow yourselves just to drift off, like in that twilight zone between wake and asleep. And if you are not drifting off, then that's also okay. And just keep letting go as much as you can. Never underestimate the power of being in this present moment. Keep letting go. And then just start moving your fingers, your toes, feet, hands, arms, legs, head, and gently come to lying on your left or your right side. When you're on your side, please give yourself a little cuddle. Please give yourself a big cuddle. And lots of appreciation for who you are, all that you've done in the world, all the things that you keep doing to be who you are. Give yourself a little bit of loving. And if it works for you as well, you might like to share some of that with people around you, dear to you, people in the world that are less fortunate than we are. And then let's just gently come up to seated. Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining me.
Namaste.
The goodness in me nourishes and honours the goodness in you. Namaste. And let's have a little chat. I'm happy to go on a bit longer. I think we're about 2 to 3 minutes before time, but I'll try and unmute you all. If it doesn't work, you might need to unmute yourselves as well. Okay. Not a bad way to start or end the day, depending on where you are in the world. How was that, Moira?
Excellent. I can't believe how much choice I have.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so freeing. It's just so freeing. You know, just when I hurt my back, I spent all that time fixing my right side, that I've found my left side is just, I can't feel it very well. I'm not, you know, so having this choice to say, hey, where's my left, is just mind-blowing, really.
Fantastic. How was that, Fiona?
It was great. Thank you. Just what I needed. I'm exhausted, and yes, it was really a great combination to the exploration. Kind of can't speak. Good to, but great to have the photos and your explanations, and then that exploration and moving from the. It's funny you were saying I just started using my face, and so I would preempt. It was all like my body without even thinking. So that was an interesting thing. Like, I was like, oh, I had just started doing that. So that was the natural thing.
Thank you for influencing me. That's good. That's nice.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I've got a class tomorrow as well. We're going to look at the feet to the hips, and then a couple of classes next week, and then that's it for till the new year. We're going to come back in a slightly different format, probably a bit shorter. Still working on that. Jacqueline.
Yeah, I found it really interesting with the spine rotation, seeing the difference between the right side and left side with the lumbar engaging.
Yes, yeah. That's Jacqueline's clock, Durham by Sea in England. In a few minutes, you get the Hells Angels going past on their motorbikes. Patricia.
Oh, no, it's locked.
Sorry? You're in lockdown.
Yeah, no Hells Angels, lockdown.
How was that, Patricia?
I find it quite difficult.
Yes.
The movement lying down.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel shut down inside.
Okay.
I couldn't move. Actually, no, I couldn't make it. But next time.
Okay. It's really interesting that that's coming up for you. You know, Amy Matthews talks about this kind of thing quite a lot, that what might be good for one person might not be so good for another person. And when you do big back bends, people often do big back bends to invigorate themselves. And Amy does it because it's the most relaxing pose that she can do. So for me to say to you, do this because it will help you relax, I don't know. I don't know whether it's going to bring up something for you or it's not going to work. And so in some ways, either looking at maybe modifying that or seeing where you go through with it and seeing whether it uncovers some historical event for you. Because often when we start getting into our breath, we get into the movement of our body, it taps into history. And that's part of the challenge that comes up for us, but part of the possibilities as well. So thanks for sharing that. And I hope that it will give you some insight somewhere. And it might just be simple, just letting go, but it might be something else as well. Because I was walking with my wife recently, and we were just watching some people in their postures, and I'm saying, this is like, you know, this person's younger than me, and it looks like they're older than me. And I say, it doesn't look like it's any deep, horrible thing in that person, but just bad habit patterns, you know. Over a period of time, if you have a bad habit pattern, it just gets ingrained and it affects everything. So, yeah. Keep at it, keep trying, keep seeing what works for you. Certainly do things that work for you. Yeah. And beautiful dog too. Susanna, how are you? You going to say something? Can we see you? Don't have to. Always nice to. Hello. Oh. And yeah, I'm going to go to now as well. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining in. Hope to see you soon. Come to some of my bone yoga if I don't see you. Happy Christmas. I hope 2021 is going to be a fantastic year for everyone in some ways. And yeah.
See you next week.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes if you want to stay. Otherwise, please feel free to go.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Susanna. Appreciate your comments. Thanks, Moira.